that their representative from Citigroup didn't make it, but we'll let people know that we notified them about this.
Well, they ought to be publicly invited on air.
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy to welcome them to do it because it's a major issue that affects everybody. I congratulate you on the writing. There should be more people covering that, if you ask me. It's a really important subject, and welcome. Welcome to Conversation. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Lucy Komisar. She's been a guest in the past. A couple of years ago we did a program. She was investigating at that time the tax evasion practices of some of our major corporations and the importance of that in terms of the structure of world society. And now she's here in February of 2006, having just come back recently from a presentation of a paper at the near or part of the overall activity at the Davos. And we're going to let her talk about that. She's followed through on that, and she's an investigative reporter of the highest order. And Lucy, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to Conversations once again. Welcome very much to Conversation Manhattan Network.
Thank you very much.
We've talked in the past, and I'm really impressed. We'll show people your resume, which goes on. It becomes encyclopedic. You've done so much writing on so many different subjects and so forth. But could you share your own personal background? Where you were born? I know you're in New York. You went to City University, but could you share some of your background, and then we'll bring it up to date with this Public Eye Award and your activities on this question about banking and shell groups and this kind of thing. But could you share your own background, please?
I was born in New York, and I went to Queens College, part of the City University. Probably the formative experience of being at City College was getting involved in the civil rights movement.
You were on the ground floor almost with them.
Yeah, we had an NAACP at Queens College, and we connected with other people in New York City that were involved in the civil rights movement. And so after my junior year, I took a leave of absence and went to Mississippi and became editor of the Mississippi Free Press, which was a weekly newspaper for black people in Mississippi.
Where was that located?
Jackson.
In Jackson. You went right into the eye of the storm, and that would have been 61, 62?
From 62 to 63.
That was really early on. And we were speaking earlier, you were aware of and friends with Stokely Carmichael, who was a mutual friend that we both had, but you knew him in those early days.
We were in the civil rights movement together.
Louds County and that kind of thing when they were going in?
Well, I knew him in New York. I didn't know him, because
I see.
We were in different places when we both went south, but I knew him in New York in the civil rights movement.
But it took a great deal of gumption, nerve, courage to go down and face that situation in those early years with the dogs and with the law all on the side of the others and the raging hatred and so forth. And I take my hat off to you enormously for having taken that pioneering course.
Thank you.
Well, you're coming out of a progressive family, or how did you happen to get so focused on the civil rights to where you would take that kind of a step? Remember Swerner and Cheney, people had their lives taken and so forth. But what was it that got you so involved with that?
My parents were Stevenson liberals,
Stevenson,
liberal Democrats.
Right.
But I had no awareness of the situation of black people in the South or in the North. I went to a suburban high school. So when I got to Queens College, the sit-in started just that winter after I got in. And when I found out about it, what it was all about, I was appalled and thought I needed to do something about it. So I got involved in the civil rights movement in New York, and then a few years later went to Mississippi, where I thought I could be more useful.
Yeah, and learn. You were probably learning. And you were doing writing there then?
Yeah, well, I edited the paper. I wrote most of the paper. There were just two of us writing the paper.
Okay. Was it weekly, did you say?
Weekly.
Okay. Is it still going? Or
No.
Yeah. But that was on the cutting edge. I congratulate you enormously on having done that. And then you've been in progressive circles, as it were. Your writing, I wouldn't mind showing it here. Let me just show. This is Lucy Komisar's resume, as it were, ladies and gentlemen. And the writing, I want to show Lucy. You may be embarrassed a little bit. This is the writings that she's done on subject after subject, on a number of journals and background. It goes on for pages and pages and pages of her contributions in terms of writing about a wide variety of subjects in many parts of the world. You've had a very, very interesting and busy, well-led life, have you not, in terms of journalism? And you picked up on that, having done a history degree, And it's always been in a progressive context that you've seen things?
I've always, it seems to me, if you want to draw a line, I'm interested in
Justice?
looking, well, justice,
Yeah.
and particularly going after the very powerful forces that prevent justice. And that's why I ended up dealing with Citigroup. It's a very powerful financial institution.
About as powerful as you can get.
Yeah, it's the biggest international financial conglomerate in the world.
In the world.
So, therefore, even though some other, probably many other banking conglomerates, banks, do what it does, we thought, and the decision to do this was not mine alone. I'm a member of the steering committee and a founder of the Tax Justice Network, which is an international organization founded in 2003
2003, okay.
to fight international tax evasion by corporations and the very rich. It was started largely by Europeans involved in development organizations because they found that the countries they were trying to help were on a treadmill going nowhere because they would borrow money or they might get investment. The money was all sucked out because the corporations that invested there didn't pay taxes.
Right.
The rich people that had wealth that was grown there didn't pay taxes, and the countries were falling further and further behind, and these groups
saddled with incredible debt.
With debt, and the debt, by the way, in effect has really been paid back because a lot of the money that came in as debt was stolen by the people in power and round-tripped right back to the international banks. So the international banks already have that money, and everybody became aware differently. There are people from Switzerland, from France, from Germany, from the UK, all separately coming to the same conclusion. And I was coming to that conclusion too because I had been doing a lot of work about third world development. I had gone to the Philippines, I'd gone to Haiti, gone to Zaire in the 80s and 90s, and I would meet oppositionists, and they'd all say to me, the dictator has looted the country, stolen everything, and it's all in Swiss banks. And I didn't know anything about the Swiss banking system, which is really the offshore bank and corporate secrecy system. Now there are about 70 jurisdictions that run these bank secrecy jurisdictions, and they would take the money that was stashed there by the Abachas of Nigeria or by Marcos of the Philippines or Mobutu of Zaire or Duvalier of Haiti, and they would hide the money. And they would make a lot of money from this money because they put them in their private banking system.
Private banking, yeah.
And people have to pay commissions. And they would get a lot of money, much more than from the normal banking system or from normal loans that they make to individuals or to companies. Or
numbered accounts?
Numbered accounts. Switzerland was famous for numbered accounts. I was appalled. I was appalled just like I was appalled years before to find out about discrimination, segregation against blacks. I said, how can this exist? Do people know about this? How could this exist? Well, it's the same feeling. Do people know that there's an international banking system run by the big banks like Citigroup and other banks that exists to hide and launder the money of crooks all over the world?
Crooks,
Do they
that
know
being some of our leadership elements of the business, governmental,
Well, the,
organizational structure of the planet.
Enron
you are claiming are, in a certain sense, crooks.
Enron had offshore accounts. It had over 700 offshore accounts in Grand Cayman. These were the reason that the offshore companies which had accounts, but they also, the system also has secret companies. Citigroup set up some secret companies for Enron so that it could cheat on its accounting, that it could pretend that loans were really trades. It set up a phony company so Citibank
Big
could
difference between a loan and a
well,
trade.
yes.
Yeah.
Loan means you're borrowing and you have to pay it back. A trade means you've earned money.
Yeah.
Citigroup actually set up the shell company that was used by one of the shell companies, but other banks, J.P. Morgan also set up a phony company. But we decided to look at Citigroup.
We being
the
yourself?
The Tax Justice Network.
Of which you are a founding member?
I'm a founding member. I'm a member of the steering committee, and we are starting an American branch. We have.
It got started in Europe, did it?
Yes, it got started in Europe. Well, the first meeting was in Porto Alegre at the World Social Forum in 2003. Yes, I was there.
How many of you were in that phone booth?
Oh, maybe there were 30 or 40 people.
30 or 40. It had to be a room then.
Yes, it was a room.
I hope it was well catered.
And
okay, yeah, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, but it was a small group.
I don't think it was catered.
Okay, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Don't recall it was catered.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. But these were people who had begun to know each other over a couple of years because they had gone to some of the European Social Forum. They'd met in Florence just earlier in the fall at the European Social Forum in Florence.
Is the European Social Forum different than the Allegre?
It's a regional meeting of the same.
Oh, is that happening
it's related.
now?
Yes, there is. The next one, the next European one, is going to be in Athens in May.
It's annual?
Yes.
In May of the year?
Whenever they decide.
May's a good time to meet in Europe.
In Europe.
Nice weather.
They've had them in different times in Europe.
Yeah,
and they've, if you look on the World Social Forum website, there are constantly meetings going on around the world, both national.
Is that right? So we tend to focus on Porto Alegre,
no,
or
not
then it
just
met
that.
in Bombay, and that's a social.
Next year it's going to be in Nairobi in Kenya.
Oh, that's the annual thing.
Yes, that's the
sort
big one.
Of the that's the big one.
That's the international, the global one.
Right, the global one that sort of is to offset Davos in certain people's minds.
Yes.
I think now they have these regional things
They're
happening.
also regional.
That's a very good idea, isn't it?
So
it seems to me for the citizens to get involved. Do we have one in North America? And do we
there
have
was
one in
Boston a couple of years ago. I don't know of any that's recently, but it will be on that list. But we started this group there. Some of the people knew each other. We got new people involved. There were people that came from Brazil, for example, and from Peru. And this got organized. We now have a staff person in London and a staff person in Washington. I invite people who are interested to check out the website.
The website for?
The Tax Justice Network.
This is specific Tax Justice Network, which is a group specifically interested in the tax issue, which would be one of the issues the social forums would take up. And let's get that straight. But what is the website for the Tax Justice?
It's www.taxjustice.net.
Okay, and it's been 3 years or so in formation?
Yes.
The site's been up, and that's a place to
go. And this the report that I wrote, which was the background for the Citigroup Award, is on the website.
Yeah, we're getting a little ahead, I think. Yeah,
people can get to that.
Right, okay. You're a member of the New York State Council on Foreign Relations, right?
Well, it's the national. It's the national.
So
but
that's
in
a
New York
group
City.
of very well-placed people in terms of understanding international relations and so forth?
That's right.
Do you find much resonancy among your members when you go to the council, to those meetings that understand what you're talking about, or do you find you're a little bit sometimes like a fish out of water in those circles?
A lot of the people there represent the big corporations that are laundering their money and their profits, laundering their profits, cheating on their taxes. So, no, there's not a great deal of interest there.
No, it's not. But you're there, and there are others there. And so what I guess I was getting at in a certain sense is that it's a very interesting waters to fish in, as it were, for investigative journalistic, trying to understand how come there is so much perceived phenotypical injustice in the world. It might do well to understand this structure, the international structure of the financial institutions, don't you think? Because it's an institutional structure that people have a hard time maybe understanding, but it goes to the basis of why there might be so much malappropriation or unjust appropriation of financial economic resources around the world and the trends therein.
You have to know how it's used. Now, there are, of course, many legitimate uses for banks. Banks exist because people need banks and companies need banks. They need to borrow money sometimes from banks, and when businesses are doing trade, they need to move their money, their payments, through banks. That's a legitimate reason. What's not legitimate is the banks to use the offshore system, which is the system located in offshore jurisdictions like Grand Cayman, Switzerland, the Bahamas, Monaco, 70 places.
70? That's
70.
A lot. It's beginning to get a look like global.
It's increased over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 years ago it was 35. It's gone up a lot because Places found they made a lot of money.
Well, that gives a wider kind of tableau for the people who want to do what is called creative accounting.
That's
to
right.
hide things and obfuscate things. It gives them ways to deal with that, like Bialystock and Bloom and the producers, or
That's
something
right.
like that, right?
And yeah, there are many places now, many more than before. Individuals hide their money and corporations hide their money.
We're coming out of a history of nation state since the French Revolution or something like that, and sovereignty is mostly at the nation state level. I mean, we're still 191 nations and states, individual states with sovereignty at the national level. The globalization is going on very quickly now. Is it you have to have financial institutions that accommodate the globalization of the economy writ large and so forth. So, I mean, there's always been banking, there's been international banking, but maybe it's a sign of the times. Mr. Friedman says it's a flat world now, and that you have these things going. Is it just are some of the things you're talking about just the result of the upset of a rapidly globalizing world economy, and there's going to be,
the use of tax evasion,
you understand what I'm saying?
the use of offshore for tax evasion goes back to the 1930s. It's not about globalization. In the early 1930s, rich French people were hiding their money in Swiss banks, and there was a raid on an apartment near the Champs-Élysées, and police found that officials from a Swiss bank were meeting their French clients there, and they seized big dossiers and books and account registers, and they found out that some of the most prominent French people, including the heads of some newspapers, corporations, some generals, some bishops, were hiding their money from taxes in this Swiss bank. That was the beginning of Swiss bank secrecy. After that,
I was going to say, how did they get the information?
Because at that time there wasn't secrecy, but 2 years later, the Swiss Parliament passed a law making it illegal to reveal the names of any clients, and they were very careful, of course, never to take the books with their clients' names in it to another country. They would stay in Switzerland, where there was bank secrecy, and there weren't going to be any police banging down the doors to look at the names of the account holders.
Prior to that, there hadn't been that kind of secrecy? Or it seems to me it goes back, if I may, before that people were using Swiss bank accounts to hide and launder funds and so forth before the 30s, did you say?
Well, the first time I saw the Swiss bank secrecy law dates to 1932.
Okay.
So if they may have been using that before then, but there wasn't bank secrecy, they assumed that their own government would not go to Switzerland and be able to get the records. The mistake this bank made was bringing the records along with their officials to an apartment in Paris, but that's when it started, and it was used also by very rich Americans, also going back to that early time. So it's not a product of globalization. Made it a bit easier because what happened was that it meant the end in most places for currency controls. Money could move very rapidly out of the country, whereas developing countries had put currency controls on so that they wouldn't get looted of their wealth, of their hard cash. But so it certainly increased. They were not 70 at the time. They increased, particularly during the 60s. In the 70s, drug traffickers got very much involved. Drug traffickers were using it. Meyer Lansky set up a Swiss bank after Al Capone
set up a bank, not an account.
He bought a Swiss bank after Al Capone was arrested. They realized that they had to launder their money so that they could show a legal provenance of it. Capone was arrested because he couldn't show where he got his money from. And I
thought it was income tax.
Well, that was it. He couldn't pay income tax because he couldn't show a legal source of his funds. You can't say, I got my money from embezzlement or from bribery, and I'm paying my tax on that. when you get your money, you have to say how you made it. So that's when laundering started.
Aren't there banks that will accept it and not care where you got it or how you got it?
Yeah,
what you do, they'll do anything,
but then
and they
the government
will cater to the market of the people who are powerful and have the money
well,
to
we're
put
talking
in the
about
account.
Citigroup, aren't we?
Well, no, we're talking about a system,
We're talking about a system.
Perhaps the most
We're
egregious
talking
in
about
your
a system,
paper.
but they needed to show where the money came from, and that's where laundering, they had to show that it was legitimate, so they would make it up, and they would set up a shell company and pretend that it was a real company, and they would say, I've got all this money, and I'm going to pay taxes on it, and it came from the ABC Trading Company that's located in Grand Cayman. Well, of course, there was no such real company.
Post office box.
It was a box. It was a brass plate company, and they had a brass plate. They had an account in a brass plate bank that wasn't a real bank.
And they can have a loss there that would be against the
It was all creative accounting. It was all
accounting.
cooking the books way back then.
Hasn't that been going on a long time?
Yes, it has. It's been going on a long time. There were hearings in Congress in the 1980s.
Okay.
In the 1980s, that's 25 years ago.
Yes, it is
The
now,
people in charge know what's going on. This is not a surprise to the people that run our country. It's only
or our countries.
Or our countries. It's only a surprise to the people out there who they don't know about it.
They don't know about it, and yet it does affect their lives very directly.
Well,
does
of
it?
course.
Not the citizens of the world.
Sure. Well, everybody.
And there's very little reporting on it, maybe because it's so complicated.
It's not complicated.
Or do you think it's covered up by a PR industry that is taking money from the major corporations to make money on this?
We have a corporate press.
Yeah.
We have a corporate press.
And this is paid for like our Congress.
It's not something they want to write about it. It's not something they want to write about. You know, we get bread and circuses, and these days that's about movie stars and who they're marrying or who they're divorcing or who's having children. It's our bread and circuses is the celebrity culture, which takes people's minds away from the real stuff that's hurting them. And this is something that's hurting everybody. Everybody is paying more and getting less in services because the rich and the corporations are cheating on their taxes with the help of the big banks like Citigroup.
Okay, help me out here a little bit back into the fact that we live in a world of sovereign states, and we have sovereign laws, and we have federal laws and so forth, and an ability to tax. We don't have an adequate, or there is no taxing power on the part of any global institution. UN is dependent upon contributions. All the institutions are national. So the tax structures are set up by the various states and so forth. So you're violating, let's suppose you have the tax laws of the United States are different than the tax laws of country B or C. And those countries can be manipulated and set up tax laws that are favorable to a corporate world where they have a global outreach, and they can just not pay much attention to the niceties of sovereignty at a political level, and they can just set up something that has an overview of the whole thing and go with it.
This is cooking the books, because under the law, all American citizens have to pay tax on their entire worldwide income. If you have when you fill out your tax form, there's a little box where you have to check if you have a foreign account. Of course, the people with foreign accounts, offshore accounts, generally don't check the box.
Well, but that's illegal not to check the box?
Of course it is.
Okay.
And it's illegal.
And they're doing that on the advice of an accountant firm?
Well,
Arthur Anderson or something?
Yes. If they have an accountant who prepares their taxes, they're doing it on the account.
And are they doing it within terms of the law allows that to be done?
No,
because
it's
under
illegal. It's illegal.
The accounting firms are telling them to do something that is blatantly illegal by the law understood?
Well, yes, of course. If some private person is not checking that box and the accountant says don't check it, that's illegal. Of course. I mean, what's on your tax form is not, you know, choose one from column A, which one do you want to fill out? You have to fill out, you have to answer all the questions. Now in a corporation, there's another point that comes into play, and that's transfer pricing. And there's investigations going on now in Congress, and there's legislation that Senator Levin has introduced that deals with that. Transfer pricing is when you launder your profits by saying that the profit was really made in another place. What they do, for example, is they move their logo. Say you've got a logo that's the logo of Coca-Cola, and you say that my logo is worth a lot of money because people recognize
logo
it.
Is worth a lot of
so
money.
you move your logo to Jersey and the Channel Islands, where you don't pay tax on your profits, and then you pay a royalty to the company that you set up in Jersey to use your logo. That could be millions of dollars, and you deduct that from your business costs back in the U.S., but the company is getting the money in Jersey and there's no tax there, so they don't pay taxes.
So they're taking advantage of a world situation that allows creative capability to exert itself, and they take advantage, and it's being done.
It's phony.
But
it's totally phony.
Okay, it's phony, you're saying, but they're taking advantage.
Well, they do it. A lot of things.
Creative usually is something that's sort of not usually seen by the mundane, ordinary people, the plodding, plow horsing. But the people who are really creative and say, look, if we do this,
there are a lot of creative.
And that's what a lot of the business structure is about, is trying
to be a
competitive edge.
A lot of the creative accountants made tax shelters, and in the last couple of days, there have some companies have been forced to pay millions of dollars in fines because they created tax shelters, which were phony creative accounting, that people would pretend that they were making investments, and they really weren't making investments. But that's what we're talking about. It's not legal. If you get caught, it's not legal.
Well, all right, I understand.
But it's not enforced enough, and companies do it as long as they can get away with it.
Right. Now, the thing I'm talking, and we're going to talk about Citigroup, and that sort of thing, and that you got a special award. We want to get to that and everything. But what I'm saying is that the companies then, if the companies are so powerful with their multinational reach, and they got such money, and now the assets of all our wealth is all going to the upper percent, an incredible growth of the money that's in the hands of the few at the plutocratic top of the society all over the world, then you got the best the best Congress money can buy. Then they can set up and have such influence that they will set up laws that will make that kind of a creative thing of hiding that money legal, so that so the company can take advantage of that specifically. So then it is being done legally. And what I'm saying is the system itself, it's not just one system doing something against the law, it's the whole system is, in a certain sense, in a systemic way, is inappropriate in terms of what the planet requires for the masses of the world to be benefited. The system is corrupt, as it were, is what we're saying in a certain sense, and it could be bought and paid for by the people with power in the world. It's not just one company like Enron doing something, getting caught at it, but the system itself is systemically inappropriate for what the planet needs, is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, that's why we chose Citigroup, because the problem of banks facilitating tax evasion by corporations and the very rich is systemic. They all do it. And we chose Citigroup because we thought that if we detailed what they have done over a period of years, and we're starting in the early 70s, it's a long time, people could see how the system works, and the fact that nothing happens to them. The first
yeah, they're getting away with it.
Well, the first point that
not just Citigroup, the whole system.
But you have to see specifically what they do.
Okay, yeah, right, okay.
To see what, I mean, I'd like to talk about specifics, not generalities.
All right, yeah.
It makes more sense that way, and then people understand what it's about.
You're really good on that. I'm more good on the generalities. So between us, maybe we can lick the platter clean.
Let's talk a bit interesting specific. In the 1970s, Citigroup invented something, did something called parking. They had companies, their branches in Europe, in Paris or in London, in Milan, in Frankfurt, that did trades in currency, and they would buy and sell currency. Now, suppose they bought and sell currency in their office in Frankfurt, and they made a big profit because they bought it at one price and they sold it for a much higher price. They would have to pay taxes on their profits. At the end of the year, you tally up all your profits, and you have to pay taxes. Well, they found a very interesting way of hiding their profits. They would pretend, if they made profitable sale, they would pretend by their bookkeeping that the sale really was made not in Frankfurt, but in Nassau, the Bahamas. Because Nassau, the Bahamas didn't have a tax on profits. And they would, just by bookkeeping, move their profits, and there was no office in Nassau that was actually doing trades. They didn't have an office doing trades.
Well, if it was inconvenient, they could just buy Nassau.
It was just bookkeeping. Well, it turned out that a young guy, one of their traders, named Edwards in Paris, found out about this And he was very naive, and he thought that his bosses didn't know about it. So he tried to tell them, and they were first uninterested. And finally, after a year of trying to tell people up the ladder, he made a report.
This is all within Citigroup.
In Citigroup. Guy worked for Citibank in Paris. He wrote a report, and he sent it to the top officials and
of the corporation.
Of the corporation. And
but not to any
he was
general
moved out of after he was complaining. He was moved out of Paris. He was brought back to New York, and after he gave this report to the top officials, he was quickly fired.
He was
in
fired.
between, one thing happened. It was clear that the officials were not interested. He gave the report to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Well, that's going into another realm than within intercorporate.
That's right. Those are supposed to make sure that the books are not crooked.
Elliot Spitzer.
Well, this was a long time ago, so he wasn't there.
Right.
This
but
was in the 1970s, and they did an investigation. They did an investigation for over a year, and the investigation is detailed in this report that I wrote. A lot of it is quoted, the original, because it was never issued by the SEC. It would have been issued in the beginning of 1981. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected. He appointed, appointed a new guy to be the head of enforcement for the SEC, and this guy said that he didn't think there was a problem if corporations cheated on their taxes. He literally said he didn't think that was a problem.
He used that term, cheated? He said cheated? He didn't say creatively?
No, he didn't say creative. If they didn't pay taxes, if they didn't pay their proper taxes, and nothing happened in the U.S. to Citigroup. Now, in some of the other countries, in France, for example, or in Switzerland, in Germany, they made Citigroup pay the back taxes. They were able to get some of the documentation, and they paid, because this guy had been able to get a lot of the inside documentation from Citigroup. And and the people there were talking openly about how they were doing this, so they didn't have to pay their taxes.
It's like an artist.
Nothing happened. Well, Walter Wriston was
they're how proud I was able to get away with it.
Walter Wriston was the head of Citigroup, and he was a good friend of Ronald Reagan.
Right.
Well, let's move on a couple of years, and Clinton is president, and then
Bob Rubin is
Bush
Secretary of the
and
Treasury.
Bob Rubin is Secretary of the Treasury.
Fight with people in Mexico, if I'm not mistaken.
And he,
and in Citigroup. Yeah.
Well, there was legislation to try to do something again. There had been legislation introduced for a long time about tax evasion and about
legislation in the American
Congress.
In the U.S. Congress.
Well, they were concerned about the use of the offshore system, also not just for tax evasion, but by drug traffickers, for example, by international criminals. And there was legislation that was introduced, and it was getting nowhere. It was blocked.
Who was introduced? Was it not Gonzalez?
It was Levin.
Levin
Again, Carl Levin, senator from Michigan.
Yeah, right.
And it was blocked by the Republicans, particularly by the Texas Bankers Association, because they were concerned that it was going to ban anonymous transfers into accounts in the U.S. You had
Which
to
was
say
a useful accounting
for
technique.
the drug traffickers. They were worried that
Well,
the drug traffickers were not going to want to send their money into Texas banks if they had to put their name on it.
That's right.
Then 9/11 happened, and all of a sudden there was some traction for the Levin legislation because it was discovered that Osama bin Laden was also using, in this case, secret accounts in Switzerland and in Nassau, the Bahamas. So legislation...
How was that found out? Did they wring it out of the people, and they're not supposed to give that information out? Those are supposed to be secret accounts. It's against the law to give that information.
It's against the law, but you know, a lot of these things are known and kept quiet. Osama bin Laden was taught the use of the offshore system by the CIA because the CIA used to funnel money to him in the 1980s through offshore accounts, particularly through BCCI, which had a branch in Islamabad. So the CIA knew a lot of things.
Contra coming around then?
CIA, and also the account of that Osama bin Laden, his organization had, was run out of the Banca del Gottardo, which is a very dirty bank in Switzerland, and the Americans knew about it because it had been the Swiss bank of the Banco Ambrosiano, which collapsed in, I guess it was the 1980s, and the Americans knew about. That was the Vatican Bank.
Oh, okay.
Remember
Yeah,
that?
I do kind of
And
remember. I haven't followed it well, yeah.
The Banco del Gotardo was their Swiss subsidiary.
Right.
Banco del Gotardo was the bank that laundered the money for Yeltsin and his friends.
Okay.
Remember the credit card escapade? That was the Banco del Gotardo in Switzerland.
Well, these
so it's
oligarchs
the same bank.
and so forth find people that will cater their banking services to the needs of the
Americans,
crooked element that wants to get around laws that are inconvenient to keeping them
the
from
Americans
making
knew
more
about
money,
this when the
or hiding it.
when the Americans there was one of the Russians was put in jail in the U.S. for a while. He was coming to the second Bush inauguration.
One of the oligarchs?
One of the friends of one of the people that worked, Borodin, that worked for Yeltsin. And the Swiss were wanted to extradite him. And I saw the document that was also written by the U.S. Justice Department based on the Swiss document asking a U.S. court, a New York court, for extradition, and it talked all about Banco del Gotardo. So the Americans knew about this. So they, once it happened, it was not hard for them to get this information. But because of all this, there was some support for this legislation. It would ban brass plate banks. The bank that they were using was a bank that didn't exist in bricks and mortar. It was just, well, a
virtual bank.
It was a virtual bank
Mail drop
that existed inside the Banco del Gotardo. It wasn't a real bank. So they wanted to ban this, and Citigroup, with Robert Rubin, fought against this.
Why?
Because they had, they were doing business with some brass plate banks. They were doing business with some phony banks. And they liked doing this because they make a lot of money from doing the offshore business. They didn't succeed, but they sent a lot of people up to Capitol Hill to try to lobby against this. And there was Robert Rubin. But at this point...
He was Secretary of the Treasury.
No, he had left, and he
had
gone to work for Citigroup less than a year after he left.
Chairman, I think, or vice chairman.
He's chairman of the executive committee. He's one of the top three, with getting something like $16 million a year, and that's just salary. That they cover a lot of their compensation up with other kinds of compensation that you don't notice. But they have a long history, going back to the 70s and up to the present. They've been doing business with a couple of brass plate banks in Argentina, and this was exposed.
Argentina, another mess.
This was exposed by the Senate Investigation Subcommittee report, and the person that owned one of the banks was in business with Citigroup in Argentina. They were co-investors in an investment company, and this guy was using an offshore bank to move money from Argentine clients that were in his real bank in Buenos Aires, moving their money to a secret offshore account in the Bahamas. It was for tax evasion.
Yeah, a lot of this is for tax. There
it was for tax evasion.
There are companies that make billions and pay no taxes at all. Are there not?
Yes, there are.
By being creatively able to manipulate the system.
By cooking the books.
Well, you say cooking the...
It's cooking the books.
What is it? What about when you... If you set the laws up that allow cooking the books to be legal, then it's not illegal.
You know, the
That's
laws...
what I'm trying to get at.
It's the enforcement. The laws say you're not allowed to have a transaction whose only purpose is to avoid taxes. That's the law. But the enforcement of the tax system has been cut back by the Bush administration, something like 1/3. They deliberately cut it back so they don't do the enforcement. They do some enforcement, but a lot of their enforcement is very small-time stuff. They're constantly going after two people that are advising people in some place out in Idaho that they shouldn't pay their taxes. They spend a lot of time going after those.
Used to say the big lie is what you use, and the big scam is what you'd use if you want to stay above the clutches of the law. And the people are setting up the terms by which the clutches of the law have any outreach at all. They're part of the system.
They have places like Google and Microsoft have moved patents, for example, to Ireland, so they don't pay. It's like moving the logo. It's the same scam.
But now, what about it? What about on the side of the people in the corporate thing? They all say we are in a cutthroat world. This is a world where you have Mr. They talk about, you know, only the paranoid survive. And you have to stay ahead of the curve. You have to get 1/4 of 1% of 1/4 of 1/8 of percent advantage over the others. And you have to stay ahead of the curve and take advantage of every possible thing that can be made available to you. And we're just competing with one another.
What do you think about
you know, that's what they will be saying, to stay alive.
What do you think about your supermarket that shortchanges you, that's supposed to give you $8 change and give you $6, then you catch the person and say, oh, we have to stay ahead of the curve, it's a cutthroat game? How do you like that?
Well, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean if somebody can steal and tell you, I have to stay ahead of the curve, it's a tough world out there?
Well, that's a clerk and a thing doing the thing.
Only taking $2, it's okay if you take $2 million?
Okay. I was just trying to make a case.
Well, there is no case.
The thing is that it's like the chicken coop. I mean, there's nothing in there but foxes. There's no I mean,
well, that's not true. You're saying
the system is inadequately able to police itself.
Well, the system is...
And it's all just a den of thieves.
But the system
exists. The system that runs the world and calls itself legitimate.
Why do we have an offshore system? It shouldn't exist. It should be abolished.
Well, okay.
It exists only for crooks.
So you're calling for a political change of the world?
Yes.
You want to challenge the leaders of the world that are running this system? Because what you're talking about are the leaders of virtually every country in the corporate structure that makes up the international financial world and the industrial world.
Well, I don't agree that it's every single person, because once you say that, if you say everybody in the world is crooked...
the system is crooked.
Well, then we have to deal with the system.
And the control of the system in the hands of people who are crooked, and they are our leaders. And the people do not know that.
I consider
and the
an
people who are trying
leader.
to call attention to that fact to the people are being bamboozled because the leaders have all the money to control the press and to buy.
You know, I don't like to make very broad statements that I don't have evidence
that's right, you like
for.
Specifics.
I like to say what I know.
You're looking at
somebody like Levin is very good.
Yeah.
He's a leader. He's
Gonzalez
a senator.
Was good, wasn't
Gonzalez was very good.
But they didn't get much done against the heavyweights, did they?
Levin is still trying. Gonzalez died. Levin is still trying. Morgenthau, the district attorney in New York, is very good. He fights, of course, he fights these guys. He's been fighting them for years.
Do you like what what's his name, Mr. Spitzer is doing?
Spitzer is good. He's fighting them.
Elliot Ness fought the mafia, that kind of thing. There's some people who do.
Yeah, they're not all bad.
The system is not totally or irrevocably corrupt.
Not everybody is not corrupt. People make the system.
Not everybody, the system is what I'm saying, not the individuals.
The offshore system is corrupt and needs to be abolished.
Oh, well.
There's no legitimate reason for secret bank accounts. If Grand Cayman wants to have a banking sector, that's just fine, but they can't have secret accounts which are owned by shell companies, which are owned by shell companies, which are owned by shell companies.
What is the international agency that can oversee this and have a sovereign capability to enforce a series of statutes and laws that will make it be responsible when you're out on the open seas? It's pirates.
There isn't any.
There's no rule of law.
Well, there could be an international tax agency. There ought to be an international tax agency.
There is not, is there?
No. There's a WTO, World Trade Organization. There ought to be a World Tax Organization to deal with this issue. We have international trade, but we have only local sovereign taxes. Now, right now, we don't have an international government, so we really can't have
That's what I'm saying.
International tax, but we can have rules that are agreed on. They agree on rules for trading.
But it's rules.
They could agree.
It's like rules that are agreed upon between the pirates that run the world. And they agree and they shave things and they understand things nuanced
well, maybe we
and
can,
everything.
but your response is, let's just go home and eat chocolates. That's no use doing anything.
No, I don't know.
And I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I think there are
good. Yeah. And one of the things you can do is you can get a group like what is the group called that's in the Davos that does this?
Well, the group that presents the awards. This is the award that we gave.
Yeah, this is the award.
We gave this award to Citigroup.
This is it. What is the group now?
The Public Eye on Davos.
Public Eye on Davos. Talk a little bit about that in the tax justice movement, and then let's get specific about this thing that you did, this paper you wrote of targeting, as it were, Citigroup, and we offered them to come on this program. They were not able to do it on such short notice, but we should let it be known that they would be welcome to come to our studios to address some of the things you're talking about them. But you wrote an indictment, as it were, about Citigroup.
I wrote a
report. Set that all up for us a little bit, and then we can introduce this, and we got a poster and so forth.
Well, the World Economic Forum is the meeting of about 2,000 very powerful corporate leaders and government officials, set up by a very clever Swiss person named Schwab, who charges them about $20,000. The corporate people pay about $20,000 or $30,000 to come. So
they got a lot.
Made himself a lot of money. Well, it's not their money; it's the corporation's money, which finally is our money.
Yes, right.
Our money.
You notice how people are doing that all over the world.
They have had meetings in which they talk about the state of the world. What they're really talking about is how to make the world a better place for the people who lead corporations.
For them. That's what I'm saying.
The last couple of years.
Like a covey of pirates.
The Berne Declaration, a Swiss group concerned about financial issues, particularly as it involves developing countries, and Pro Natura, which is the Swiss branch of Friends of the Earth, have run programs at the same time called Public Eye on Davos. The first few years they did conferences, and the last 2 years they gave alternative awards. And they asked NGOs, non-governmental organizations, to nominate corporations in the categories of environment, work and social justice, and tax. And for the last 2 years, the Tax Justice Network has nominated the winning entrants. Last year it was KPMG, the big accounting firm, for helping promote tax evasion.
And the winner is?
And this year,
for the worst corporate record?
This year the winner was CITIGROUP. We informed Charles Prince, the CEO, several weeks before Davos, and he was there. So we knew he was going to be there.
He was there at Davos.
We asked him if he would like to come and receive his award in person.
It'd be like the Academy Award for corporate irresponsibility.
It is for corporate irresponsibility in engaging in and promoting international tax evasion. But Mr. Prince did not respond to our invitation.
Declined to accept the award.
We are still happy to
present
this
the award here,
to Mr. Prince
maybe
anytime.
I don't know if you can come in. Maybe you can come in. This is the award. This is like the Academy.
That's the eye. That's the eye representing the public eye on Davos.
This is the eye on Davos, and this is put together. And can you come in tight on the plaque? You can see what it says. If you can come in that tight, I don't know if you can.
It's an award to CITIGROUP in the category of tax.
And it says, can you read that now? If you come right in on it, it says, can you read it there? Can you read it? Maybe off the plaque itself. Can you read it? What does it say?
I can read it.
You ought to put that in red or something.
Yes, it says the Public Eye Award 2006 in the tax category for CITIGROUP, Inc.
That's the Academy Award for Corporate Irresponsibility is proudly presented to the worst corporation they could identify for violating an the tax system in a just way for the people of the world, and it was presented, and they did not come to accept the award.
That's right.
But this is the award that was put together. And do they have one for who's violated the environment the most?
That was for Chevron for dumping oil sludge in the Amazon of Ecuador, northern part of Ecuador.
Those guys are really competing to be the winner of those awards because they're just polluting the environment, and it's hard to identify. It's a really good and interesting idea. Is it very well attended? Do you get much media attention? Most of the media is probably over on those rich guys at the Davos meeting.
The alternative media, IPS wrote about it, Interpress Service, but the corporate media, the Swiss media wrote about it and had cameras. But the international media is not interested in the critics of corporations. They're interested in the corporations.
Well, the corporations have all the money.
Well, yes.
And it is the money is the thing that is the main attraction. Oh, and also we have here, this is a little. This is a thing. If you can come in on this, Nat, right? This is a billboard that was there. Maybe you could explain it.
Oh, it's the poster that was put up for the Public Eye Awards ceremony. The gentleman up here is the head of the World Economic Forum, Mr. Schwab, and here are these people dressed as Indians in a Bollywood film are the heads of the different corporations. Right over here on this side, it says CITIGROUP, and the others have placards on them: Coca-Cola, Texaco, Walt Disney, Nestle, indicating the corporation that they come from.
That's funny. That's funny. And this was out. We got some They had it as a poster outside on a big thing. You could
It was
see
out. It was put out in the street in large size
this was
posters.
actually done. This was actually carried on. Your activity was actually carried on in the town of Davos while the meeting of Davos was going on. And how does that work? I think that's a good idea. And is it beginning to get traction and more of that? And will they follow through each year on that?
They'll do it again.
Are they getting some support from people? Because Lord knows there's an awful lot of people who are beginning to bring a critique of the corporate structure and the way the corporate structure and the globalized economies
there were a lot of nominations.
Are structuring the world. Yeah.
There were a lot of nominations for these prizes. And we expect there will be more next year.
You could get somebody like Bono, or somebody who's really critical and calling and putting the feet to the fire of an unjust system that is operating only to benefit the very wealthy all over the world. I should think it would be giving these awards could become a very big thing in terms of rallying support against the basic premises that the public relations firms and so forth are relentlessly telling us everything is great being done, and the ads tell us everything is great the way things are, whereas much of the world knows there are systemic problems.
Yeah, the important thing is it's a way to get out the details of the story. The report,
or the general patterns as well.
Well, but you have to know the specifics, because to say generally that a company violates the environment or that it promotes tax evasion doesn't persuade people as much as the details. One of the things, the report that I did was to support our nomination for Citigroup, and it's on the website.
Yeah, you've got it down chapter and verse.
And I think that's why we won. We put together a pretty solid report. Actually, we also asked Citigroup if they would like to talk about this before it was published, because we wanted to include their responses.
What was your response?
Well, they wouldn't respond. I spoke to on the phone with an official who deals with civil society, and I spoke and I sent her an email, and she said, "Well, I'll get back to you." But several emails later, she didn't. I think they don't want to talk about it because the information is very solid. One of my favorite parts.
I think it's a marvelous idea.
One of my
you
favorite.
You could get Ralph Nader there. You could get Michael Moore there. You could get some real celebrity people.
I think they like to star in their own parades.
Well, all right, but no. But I'm trying to tell you, it's a great idea to give an Academy Award for the working of our corporate system.
Well,
globally.
You could do that on one of your programs.
Well, okay. I would do everything I could to try and make that available. And then I'd also like to present it so that if they want to come in and say,
well, I hope they do
except we get so much of it in the ads. We're just being besieged with those corporations.
I want to tell an interesting story, which is one of the things that they have a hard time countering. This was a very clever thing done a few years ago by a journalist in Buenos Aires. He got an actor to go visit a Citibank official and pretend to be a businessman who just sold a business for more than $500,000 and wanted to arrange, well, he didn't really say, "I don't want to pay taxes," but he was hinting. And the Citibanker, and this was recorded on video, was later shown on television.
It's good, like Rodney King.
And the Citibanker said, "Oh, I can arrange this, because what we're going to do is we're going to move about $300,000 of your money up to New York, to an account in New York, to our
doesn't even exist.
To our wait a minute, it does exist.
Sorry.
To our international personal banking.
Yeah.
What this is for foreigners, and they put their money in an account in New York." And he said, "And it would be better if we didn't send it up in your name. Let's wire it up in another way, and we will send it up to an account in New York, and you won't pay taxes in the U.S. because you're a foreigner." But and he said, "Am I going to pay taxes in Argentina?" Well, they're not going to know about it because Citibank in New York is not going to tell them about it. So in Argentina, they are not going to know about that we have moved $300,000 into an account in New York. And he said,
and I get to keep it all.
And he said, 85% of my clients do this. They are tired of paying taxes. This was all put on television.
Isn't that great?
This was just a couple of years ago in Buenos Aires. They put it on television. And the guy the Citibanker, was fired and then paid off to keep quiet. And they moved their private banking accounts to Chile and to Uruguay because there was a lot of hostility in Argentina. So the same people, though, that come into an office of Citibank in Argentina are just set up with an account that's in Chile, and from there they can move their money to offshore accounts, or New York, in that case, acts as an offshore account because they are keeping the money secret. They are not reporting that they have this money, and the guy was helped by the city banker, and it's all on video.
Isn't that great? It's like a comedy show. They should put it on the comedy channels, like Three Card Monte. And it's like going, like, tell you what I'm going to do.
That's
and we're
right.
and they could get, if they could get video, got little video cameras now where they could get this stuff. You could build a whole network of programming around
case
it.
of
And then present, what do you call this thing? The Eye on Davos?
The Eye on Davos.
Present it, make a big thing, get a big hall, get some real money behind it, turn it into an Academy Award for corporate and political irresponsibility by the planet's leadership. Great idea.
When it was discovered that Citibank was moving the money of Raul Salinas, who's the brother of the former president of Mexico, he had stolen about $200 million.
They're all stealing.
They had been kickbacks, drug trafficking. They set up, the woman who was his banker explained before a Senate committee how they set up secret accounts in Grand Cayman, accounts that were not in his name.
Get it on
phony
camera.
shell companies, and she said, we do this for everybody. Almost all of the Latin American accounts of the wealthy are done this way, all over Latin America.
Right.
This is our standard procedure.
Yeah.
And they said, do the people at the top know about this? Yes. At that point, it was William Rhodes, head of Citibank. Yes. She said Rhodes knew about it. They all know about it. The people in Citibank, Citigroup, they know they're running. Basically, it's a tax evasion scam.
And we're sick of paying taxes.
Yes.
Yes, and it's like
the rich people don't want to pay taxes. We pay taxes.
And you've got to learn to groove in a supermod world and take advantage of all these benefits. And then we got the people in the White House that are going to invite $2 trillion tax cut to the wealthy. And you can buy the Congress, and you can buy, that kind of thing. But I really think this thing you're doing, congratulations to you for having done it. And we do invite a representative of City Corps to come in and talk to these issues. They think it's grossly inappropriate what's being said. But I think it's really interesting in a way to get a little attention brought to this on the part of the people that you're speaking for. And it all began back when you went down to Mississippi as a young person on the civil rights thing. Same kind of attitude appeals to the absurdity of what's going on now as then in terms of race issues. And congratulations on a life very well spent that continues to pick up speed as you go along, it seems to me. Sorry we've run out of time. And we got a lot more we could say, but thank you, Lucy, very much for coming in. We could go on talking for 27 hours, easy. You ought to have maybe start a program over here. Maybe you could within this. But it's your pleasure to have had the perceptions of Lucy Komisar, investigative journalist extraordinaire, I would say. And your pleasure to have her perceptions. We do once again invite Citigroup public relations people to come in and do a program and talk with her about these issues and so forth. And we also invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again tomorrow on Conversations, so please tune in then. But Lucy, once again, thanks a lot for coming in. It's really a pleasure always talking with you. We always run out of time, but thank you for the report. It's really, really interesting, and for this wonderful award. I think you're really on to something.
It stays in my apartment until it's collected by Mr. Prince.
Mr. Prince. Okay, he could come in. Yeah, you could have them come down the aisle with, like the Academy Award thing. I think it's a wonderful idea. I really think it's got legs. And to do it in Davos while all of those people are celebrating themselves would be a very interesting thing to get a lot more interest behind and real support behind for that kind of a thing, and then have it go out on television and so forth. That could